and 20, our capacity at that point was 60%. And then we entered phase two on November 1st of 2020, and our capacity was at 39.4% or 399.8 elevation. And we can see as well the 25% reserve in capacity for the fire storage. So this is a new graph we implemented based off feedback from last city council meeting. And this will also be now included in the water supply staff report going forward. And that will conclude my update. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any input from council on the charts? I had one question I just wanted to clarify. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. And thank you, Martine, for that update. Those are nice additions to the water report. I just had one quick question about, is there some way on the first chart that you could, or what is our level in our ordinance? What's it explicitly say in terms of water emergency when we're in phase one or phase two or phase three? What is that level, and is there a way you can indicate that?
Yeah. Yes, I can follow up and see if it's spelled out and also include that in the graph. I think that would be helpful.
Yep. Thank you much.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the new graphs. I was having a hard time interpreting that first one and understanding why we were in such a bad place last year. You know, we got so low on our water, and then the forecast is not showing getting anywhere near that. So how is that determined? I'm having a hard time just understanding that, given how serious, you know, we're having another year of drought, and just knowing we've had all of these extremely hot days and still have the fire risk out there. And I just need help understanding that.
Yeah, I probably could help on that too. In terms of, you know, what saved us is really the late October and November, late December rainfall that we got. It was almost targeted, you could say. We got over 10 inches in the watershed above Bell Canyon. So it really filled up our reservoir. It allowed us to kind of at least go back to a phase one. Prior to that, we were still in phase two, and with the reservoir filling and spilling, we felt it was an opportunity for us to go back to phase one. Of course, phase one, the difference between phase one and phase two is one's mandatory savings, one's voluntary, and we're still voluntary saving the same targeted amounts, and we are achieving those right now. So that's the difference. In terms of the projection, we're looking at worst case scenario here historically. Now, you know, it doesn't take into account climate change, but historically, you know, the minimum amount of inches of rain over the watershed, and Martine, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 10 inches over the entire season. So we're looking at 2 seasons of rainfall there, 10 inches, which is the minimum amount recorded in our history here local. So if you want to pull up the graph and maybe that'll help kind of visualize, you know, the dire straits we were in September, got the October rain, jumped up the reservoir quite full, and then the November, December, a couple of storms there brought it to spill.
Does that answer the question,
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Thank you.
That clarified for me as well. I wanted to understand the projection on the 10 inches of using the 10 inches of rain, that being our historic low. Thank you very much for the presentation. Is there anything else, Mr. Rincon, on that aspect?
No, just congratulations to the community to continue to save water, and let's keep at it. We got a long, hot summer in front of us.
Yes, thank you. Okay, very good. So if Mr. McCann is not going to bring other reports forward, if that's what we have this evening, we'll move to our council members, and I'll look to see if council has anything to bring forward this evening. I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I'll just do a quick report on the 2 bigger meetings I attended. One was the Upper Valley Waste Management Authority, where we got the news that there's going to be the automatic 10.9% rate increases that are going to kick in July 1st. This is an increase that was already adopted in the franchise agreement when that was updated. So that's already baked into what happens every year for 3 years. That doesn't actually come to the board. It just happens automatically. There is an extraordinary rate increase if the company needs it, and the company, once it's authorized, and the company has asked for that. So that will be considered in the future. Right now, the staff at the Upper Valley Waste Management is working on that, and we'll bring that back to the authority. We don't have that information right now. We did get the reasons behind it, and for the potential 5% over what they're already committed to get, which is that 10.9 increase, is changes to the labor market, inflation, fuel, insurance, and some other expenses. We also heard about grant opportunities locally through the Upper Valley Waste Management Authority. There's $300,000, and St. Helena hasn't gone for those yet. So I reached out to our city manager and we spoke about that, and we identified some great opportunities, and we're going to be moving forward with discussions. And Priya Nixon is going to be helping work with me to make sure that we can get some of that funding. Some ideas could be a permanent home to be able to house compost, since we need to be providing compost, not only making sure we're putting more of the food waste into the green bin and creating compost, but also getting it out to the community. We need a place to put that so people can easily pick it up for free and have that. So that's one idea, possible grant idea. It could be also new containers for our parks. There's a bunch of ideas that'll be explored. The other meeting I attended was with our mayor, was the Climate Action Committee. We had that, the agenda items. We received a presentation on the Napa County Climate Challenge website. This is a website that engages the community and actually schools and students in taking climate action and brings it back to the individual level for what you can do. It also shares information on what local government is doing. You can customize each page per city if we want to. It turns out there's going to be a presentation to our Active Transportation Sustainability Committee coming up. So we'll hear more about that locally. We also had an item about approving the formation of a staff working group to develop a regional climate action plan. So this is going to be 2 staff members from our city. This idea came already from city managers that got together and spoke with the county staff that work with us on this committee. So we approved it on the committee level. Everybody was in agreement. From what I remember, Mayor, you can correct me if I'm remembering it incorrectly, but I remember everybody being in agreement and we all voted for it. So that will be moving forward. And then we also had an update on the greenhouse gas inventory that's going to be coming early fall.
Thank you. And we will see if there's any other council input. I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to leave the meeting without thanking Chief Hartley and his staff, all of his officers, for the excellent police work that he talked about with respect to the hit and run and identifying the vehicle and the suspect. In particular, Officer, if I'm pronouncing the name right, Masella, who was apparently off duty in Napa and did some really good police work off duty to help identify the vehicle and the suspect. Excellent police work for a very small staffed office, very community oriented, excellent in the relationships that you have with businesses to be able to use the videos and have that interaction with our folks downtown to do what you did. Express our gratitude to all of your officers, Chief Hartley. I really appreciate that. Blue zones. As you know, I represent the steering committee, the Blue Zone Steering Committee. We had some good news just recently. Councilmember Chateau, Mayor Ellsworth, and I all attended a little open house at Pizzeria Trevina, which has become the first Blue Zone approved restaurant in the Upper Napa Valley. Congratulations to the ownership and staff, the chef. Some of the things that they examined to become Blue Zone approved are healthier menu options, of course, highlighting various choices of food, making changes to the actual environment of the dining. Some of the things that Pizzeria Trevina has done is revamped their menu to make it more inviting in terms of the choices, fruits and vegetables from local farmers markets. When they're in season, they purchase those when they can. They're not offering soda chocolate milk, or fruit juices as default beverages for children's meals. They've installed a bicycle rack to make it more friendly for active transportation users. And there's many other things to be qualified. It's very long and lengthy, kind of a robust list. So they've met those requirements and they have become Blue Zone approved. And then just one, I don't know if the mayor wants to talk about Sosco Junction. I know I sent a written report on that. I'll skip that. One thing that was not mentioned in the report from staff is paving. Highway 29 is going to be repaved again starting July 7th. Basically from here to Calistoga in portions. It's following along on the completion of the PG&E gas line project. Most of the work will be at night, so it'll probably affect Paul Doring more than all of you as I come home from Calistoga on Tuesday nights. But the community should know about that and know that there's going to be one lane closed, one lane open. It's going to be slow going. This is going to be basically after 7 o'clock into the early morning hours. But don't be surprised by that, community. Be patient with our Caltrans workers and the folks who are working out there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe I saw Councilmember Hall, but I'm seeing Mr. McCann. May I see if there's a clarification from Mr. McCann?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Vice Mayor for his recognition of our police department, but I wanted to point out something interesting that Officer Masella, and I think I have that correct, is a rookie. We just brought him on. He's a brand new officer. It's a really excellent work. Chief, do I have that correct?
That is correct. Officer Marcella is currently in the second phase of his field training. He was hired 2 months ago, and he hasn't even completed field training yet and is already learning quickly on how to identify and take on investigative matters. We're very proud of him. And thank you, Vice Mayor Doring, for recognizing our department and our hard workers.
Way to go, rookie.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the Vice Mayor as well for his updates and the recognition to the police department for their work. And also, April, thank you for the update on the GO bond and what are the next steps there. I know that there's been lots of questions coming in, so that's been real helpful to get the update. I was just thanking Councilmember Shuto on the waste management JPA grant monies. If I recall, I think those monies become, the grants become larger and larger over time. I forget what they top out at, but one thought is we do have a nice CARES program in town, and some of those monies could be set aside if you combine lists. I don't know how we do it, but folks who are in need of reducing costs, who are already qualified by CARES as for low income assistance, maybe that's one other component where we can remove the cost of disposal for those folks. So just one thought, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to, very respectfully, maybe at some point we need to have a conversation with the city manager and city attorney in terms of, I want to be careful in terms of Councilmember Hall, in terms of participation in the waste management conversations because of your connections there. So I just want to be very careful. So it may be a conversation we ultimately have at some point with the city manager, city attorney to see where those lines lay. So appreciate it. Any other council input? So I've got a few things. First, I do also want to thank Chief Hartley and the police department for this excellent ongoing work. One of the excellent things that Chief Hartley was able to really help in the meeting with Caltrans yesterday was that connection to helping Caltrans understand what's happening on the ground as where it may be a disconnect with the data that they're seeing. And Chief Hartley really stepped up and helped make that clear, that more work needs to be done to help them understand the real life on the ground reality we're seeing. So thank you, Chief Hartley. We're going to skip a meeting, the first meeting in July, the first Tuesday. So we will there'll be a section here of about a month, and let folks catch a breath as we move forward here. And then we'll be coming back at the second meeting of July. Just want to put that on people's radar. As we get into fire season, dry season, just got to hammer home the prep, the go bags, the grab lists, defensible space, community networks, all working together. With 4th of July coming up, just want to really urge people to be very careful with any open flame or sparking, barbecues, et cetera, being very, very careful. And of course, reminding folks that fireworks are illegal, and beyond just being illegal, the danger to really everything we hold dear here if a fire gets out of control. So I just want to urge people to be as careful as possible with all flame and sparking, et cetera. I want to thank the Parks and Rec Department for this creative approach to celebrating the 4th in more fire-safe ways. It's a whole new era of wildfire dynamics, and we're having to shift our thinking. It's a difficult thing to do, but looking for those fire-safe opportunities. Just want to be really thankful to Parks and Rec for how they're bringing forward something good, something new in a more fire-safe way. Water conservation, every drop we save today will benefit us tomorrow. Thank you for the presentation. And we just want to keep folks on track with the water conservation. And then 2 items I want to bring up, and this is possibly as we get to our meeting in late July and our new city manager comes on, but the consideration of looking as we transition from College Avenue with City Hall to College Avenue from Railroad Avenue, the discussion of Railroad Avenue as housing, as an affordable housing opportunity. I want to have that conversation moving forward. And then finally, or almost finally, as we come to the end of Pride Month, I also, as we come back after the sort of summer break, have a discussion on a more permanent flying of the progress and pride flags as we move forward. So that's a discussion I'd like to get into. And then finally, in terms of Soskel Junction, a really great collaborative effort up and down the valley. This is St. Helena working with Calistoga, Yountville, Napa, and American Canyon looking for solutions, traffic solutions. And this is a big, big project that it will benefit flow throughout the entire county. So that was a big step forward. So that's it for me. And I will look to, I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
I want to thank you, Mayor, for raising the issue about Railroad Avenue and housing as a potential topic coming up in a month or so. I definitely would support that. I think it's important that we look at all of our assets and get back to the conversation that we started last fall, which was how are we handling our surplus assets? And it would be good to run through that list again and make sure that we are following the process to either divest of those assets or make clear progress forward on doing something else with those assets. I don't think that's what the outcome was in our last meeting, and I'm not sure what the issues were involved, but it would be great to get back to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And as our new city manager comes on board, I believe that is a place that we can move forward. And so I look to Mr. McCann.
Thank you. Just very quickly, with that interest and that confirmation, we will include this on an agenda for a future discussion. We'll refresh the discussion topic that you had, I think it was more than a year ago, about city surplus property. There's a process that is in place. There's a Public Property Surplus Act. There's a number of steps involved in that. It'd be good to give the council a refresher. Our city attorneys provided an opinion memo on that some months ago. We'll get that out to the council so you can understand that process. But it'd be good to explore the opportunities to bring public land onto the table and explore the opportunities for perhaps a more vibrant and vital use of that land to address a variety of needs that we have in the community. So we'll put that on our agenda, and you all can talk about that in the coming months. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Seeing no additional council input at this point, we will then move to our consent items. And this is where members of the council, the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purpose of considering alternative action for extended discussion or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. And so I will read through to give an opportunity for anybody to raise a hand to pull one. And if our city clerk will help me keep an eye. I'll start with 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, and 7.6. Oh, I'm seeing a hand from Council Member Hardy.
Yes, I'd like to pull 7.4. I have some questions for staff.
Okay, we'll pull that one. Any others? And I'm seeing nothing, nobody from the public. City, I'll look to Ms. Shafopoulos.
There are none.
Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to pass the consent calendar with the exception of item 7.4.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Hardy,
yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. And we'll circle back to item 7.4. Councilmember Hardy, you have some questions?
Yes, I'm wondering how the payment on the promissory note is reflected in the budget forecast. Looking at it, I realize that it has a current maturity date of August 1, 2022. So if I didn't know otherwise, I would think that that would show up in our revenue forecast for the coming fiscal year. Am I right? Am I wrong? Please tell me how we show this kind of revenue in the budget. Thank you.
Yes, I can definitely answer that question. So you would not see it in the operations budget. This particular promissory note, it was to pay back impact fees specifically. So it's both water and wastewater impact fees. So it would not show on the operations side of water and wastewater. It would actually be a revenue in for the impact fees themselves. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, partly, but then where do we show the impact fees and where does the money go? Then would be my next question.
So the money for the impact fees, you would see it.
Use that money once we've received it.
Once we receive the money for the impact fees, we can use it in accordance with the currently adopted impact fee schedule. And what that schedule does is when we adopt impact fees, it looks at the impact new development has on certain systems, such as the water wastewater system, and it allocates a percentage of the funds that can actually use for a certain project. Right now, a lot of the funds for both the water impact fee and also the wastewater impact fee can go 100% towards tertiary treatment. And so we are looking at exhausting most of the funds that we have for that to go towards the Purple Pipe project and the wastewater treatment plant because it will be ready for tertiary treatment.
So then are these funds accounted for in the enterprise budgets?
They would be accounted for in the enterprise CIP budget. So it would be linked to a capital improvement project. But in the audited financials, just to throw a little extra in there, on the audited financials, when you look at the enterprise systems for either the water or wastewater system, those fund balances take into consideration the operations, the CIP, and then also impact fees. So in the financial statements, they're all lumped together. And then in the financial statements, it also designates the loan amount that we have that's still outstanding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, yes, Mr. McCann.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just thank the council as I like to say, there's a number of items that you've approved on consent. They're all meaningful to the community, I think. We've been talking a bit about the good work of our police department. An item on there is our agreement with the Police Officers Association, providing them with a contract, terms, benefits, salaries moving forward.
Mr. McCann, if I may interrupt, I think we have to vote an open public comment on 7.4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you did it.
And get that done and then get the summary, if that's okay.
Awesome. Okay, really good.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions on 7.4 from council? I'm seeing none. So we'll look to our public comment to see if there's any input comment there on 7.4.
There is none.
Seeing that, we'll bring it back to the council. If there's no additional comment, I would ask for a motion.
I move approval of 7.4.
Second.
Was that Lester and then Vice Mayor Doring?
That was Councilmember Hardy, yes, and Vice Mayor Doring.
Okay. Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. So with that, Mr. McCann, we'll hand it back to you and to continue with the summary, please. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the council. There's a number of important items that you just approved. One of them relates to salaries and benefits for the members of our police department. So that's our dispatchers as well as our officers. Just a really good statement from the city council desiring to address salaries to make them competitive in the market and to provide wages that are appropriate for our staff. So I thank you very much for supporting staff's recommendation. I know that the employees are pleased with that, and I think it will help us to retain our good officers, and then when we do have an opening, to attract well-qualified ones like our newest rookie. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was our consent calendar, and we're going to move past that. And what we've done is we've moved up item 10.2. This is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution appointing applicants to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Planning Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and Library Board of Trustees, and consider leaving the recruitment open for the unfilled terms of office until filled. And this is our city clerk, Cindy Shafopoulos, putting this together. Can you, would you like to give us just a little overview here and our step here in terms of making our selection?
Certainly. We held a fantastic, well-attended applicant interview meeting earlier today at 4:30. And so we have 13 applicants for various boards and committee and commission openings. And so it's appropriate if you want to have any council discussion, or if we'd like to take a break and go ahead and have each council member complete their ballot, send it to the city clerk for ranking, and then we will rejoin the meeting and I would announce the rankings.
Okay, very good. I think what I'll do, first I'll just look to see if there's any council input here. And then I will, I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, I'm just wondering whether there's really a need to rank applicants for those commissions where the number of applicants equals the number of vacancies.
My question came up earlier on that to our city clerk. I know that we're in the midst of evolving this process and moving away from this ranking sort of protocol. My question is, can we do something different than is established in terms of that, or do we need to continue with what's established until we vote to make the changes once we get the pertinent information?
I would take council direction.
Okay. Mr. Vice Mayor, any thoughts here on a way to proceed with this?
Well, I think Councilmember Hardy makes a good point about the necessity of having a ranking of those particular committees that only have enough applicants to fill the open seats. I'm open to foregoing that process and just focusing on, I believe it's 2 committees, if I'm not mistaken, that would require a ranking until we change that system, hopefully soon. So I'm okay with that.
Okay,
That is correct.
okay, and then it was suggested also on those that we just, with a single motion, bring everybody on board. Councilmember Hardy?
Well, I was just going to make exactly that suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I think in terms of process, if we've had council input, I'll open it to public comment before we go to our voting. I just want first to just really thank those who put their themselves forward. There will be other openings, so please, if one of these, if you don't get on one of these, please continue to keep engaged, and openings will come up. It's just very much appreciated and really necessary for our local governance and serving the community to have this type of participation. So with that, I'll look to see if there's any public comment at this point.
There are no hands raised.
Okay, very good. And with that, Cindy, how much time do you think works for you for us to break to do this?
Let's start with 5 minutes. And so if you can return the library board and planning commission ballots to me as soon as you can, then I can rank them and return to open session.
Okay, very good. So we'll plan on coming back, we'll say 6:58 and see you then. This may take just a few more minutes, but we're getting there. Thanks, everybody, for your patience.
Okay, I've got the tallies ready.
Okay, we'll bring everybody back here. And looks like everybody's coming on here, so let me make sure I'm at the item. Okay. So we have our council returned. We have our city clerk, our city manager, and our attorney. So we'll move forward now. And once again, thanking everybody for their participation and willingness to participate. I'll look to our city clerk to let us know what the numbers are coming in. And again, I want to let our folks know here that we are evolving this system. So we're at the tail end, and I want to thank Councilmember Hardy for really recognizing a need to evolve this. So I just want to put that out there, that we're evolving this system, and everybody who's put in is very, very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. So for the Planning Commission, the top vote went to Christopher Warner.
Okay, and my thought, let's see, I think moving through these separately will give us the best ability to move forward. So with that, unless there's any objection, I would nominate Chris Warner for the position.
I second that motion.
And a roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Ito,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right,
And
moving on.
we'll move then to our Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. This is one that had the equal number of applicants to positions. And so with that, then we'd be looking for a single motion to approve Glenn Smith, Leslie Stanton, and Madeline Chandler appoint to those positions. So I would nominate in a single motion those three.
Second.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Ito,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Okay, and now we'll move to our Library Board of Trustees, and our city clerk will let us know how that came forward.
Okay, the top four in no particular order is Terry Wood, Suzanne Rumian, Juliette Belmont, and Alexandra Haslip.
Okay. So could you read those again, please? I'm sorry.
Alexandra Haslip, Juliette Belmont, Susanna Rumian, and Terry Wood.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And so with that, then I would nominate, and now I can do this in a single motion, the four, is that correct?
Yes, you can.
Yes, please.
Okay, very good. So then I would nominate Alexander Haslip, Susanna Rumian, Terry Wood, and Juliette Valmont for the four available terms.
Second?
Mayor Eldred,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Hall, Councilmember Hall,
Oh, yes, sorry.
Duto,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. And again, thank you all who put forward, and there'll be plenty of space for other opportunities. And our Parks and Recreation Commission, I would nominate our three applications or applicants from Doug Beauchesne, Michelle Deasy, and Ty Taylor.
I'll second.
Mayor Eldred,
Yes.
Councilmember Duto,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for going through this process. As I say, we're on a step of evolving it, but your community participation is very, very much appreciated. So we'll all move forward together with this. Thank you. And we'll now move back to our agenda here and come back into our order of 8.1 will not be heard. So we'll move to item 9.1 under old business. This is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving revision number 3 to City Council Policy PF10016, financial policy related to A, compliance with GASB statement number 98, updating the name Comprehensive Annual Financial Report to Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. B, update language related to financing capital improvement projects. And 2, repealing and rescinding any previous policies or administrative memoranda which are inconsistent with City Council Policy P-F1-0016, financial policy revision number 3. And this is our Assistant City Manager, Dr. Mitz.
Great, thank you very much. So before you, we are actually going to be doing two different things with this item tonight. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Cindy. So the first thing is a recommended adoption of the policy updates, which I'll briefly review with you. And then the second item is to have council direction to staff for future policy considerations. What is being brought before City Council tonight is specifically related to the initial question regarding issuance of debt for capital improvement projects, specifically for the enterprise funds. In the midst of that, I know we've had several council discussions regarding funding, general fund reserve levels, as well as some other comments from other council members to both myself and City Manager McCann. So we definitely don't want to lose sight of that. So the second portion of this report is going to be getting some future policy consideration information from City Council. So the next slide, please. So real quick background on this item is council did have numerous discussions regarding the current policy as it relates to the issuance of debt for CIPs. Again, more specifically as they relate to the enterprise funds as well as issuance of general obligation bonds or GO bonds. At the February 8th, 2022 meeting, staff did present a draft policy to City Council for review. At that meeting, based on City Council feedback and comments, as well as public comment, the City Council did provide direction for the staff to include clarifying language to the policy, also look at best practices for enterprise fund debt issuance, and also develop a criteria to utilize general fund resources. Specifically, what criteria do we want to put in place, as well as if general fund money is used for other funding sources, terminology on being an inter-fund loan. So the next slide, please. The first thing that staff did look at, we did look at financial policies and best practices. I did enlist the help of Mark Walsh, who's the city's CPA that we utilize on retainer. And what we did is we did do a review of debt issuance and financial policies. We looked at these policies from other agencies. We looked at the other agencies directly in this valley, as well as elsewhere, things that were similar size than ours and also larger entities. So we ended up looking at 8 different cities, as well as 3 different counties. And the counties, provided some great information as well for their debt issuance policies. In addition, we did look at the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, at their best practices. And then we also looked at the California Debt and Investment Advisory Committee, or CDIAC. And looking at all of those different entities, our findings were that there's no financial policies specifically address the utilization of general obligation bond proceeds for enterprise fund assets. And I know we had mentioned this in previous meetings that we did initially when we started looking at this, we looked at what our financial policies stated in them as far as debt issuance. Everything related to debt issuance, after talking to bond counsel, our city attorney, as well as our municipal finance advisor, does allow us to issue GO bond debt for enterprise funds, but we're really looking to see if there's any other specific policies regarding that, whether it was appropriate or not appropriate, and we could not find any policies. Next slide. So based on that information, we did, in working with the city CPA, we did feel there's definitely room for some improvement in our financial policies as it specifically relates to capital improvement projects. So based on the information that we reviewed, the staff does recommend the following changes to the financial policies, which are all provided to the City Council in the staff report in red line version. So the first is addition of policy language specifically for inter-fund loans. And so this is updating specifically section 3C6A, which is under capital improvement program. Updating section 3C7, which is also under the capital improvement program section of the policy. And then we actually added an entire new section, which is known as section 3K, which specifically talks about inter-fund loans. The other thing that we did is we are recommending the addition of clarifying language to section 3C, and that's for the capital improvement program. And you'll note in there, and this was one of the public comments, was just having the differentiation between the terminology of funding and financing. It added a little more clarifying language in there. So there weren't any large policy updates, but it just added some more clarifying information. The other thing that we are making the recommendation is addition of a funding capital improvement section within section 3C. So that's now noted as section 3C10. And what that is we looked at League of California Cities, different GFOA resources that really did talk about what are the most common funding mechanisms that are out there to fund capital improvement programs. Doesn't mean that we're limited to these, but we wanted to memorialize what those funding mechanisms are that are available to City Council. So those are memorialized in that new section number 10. And then that last item that we are making the recommendation for, which we touched on at the February 8th meeting, it's an administrative update just to remain compliant with GASB statement number 98. And GASB is the Government Accounting Standards Board. And what that is, it's changing the name from the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report to the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. The reason for the change is there was some concerns that were brought in front of the GASB board regarding the terminology, the acronym for the comprehensive annual financial report that are derogatory. And so just when it was said, the acronym did sound like it was a derogatory term. The GASB board did recognize that, and that's why we have changed to the annual comprehensive financial report. Next slide. So as stated earlier, there are two different things in front of council tonight. So the first item is for council consideration is adopting the recommended changes to the financial policy. And then the second portion of this, which I'll take notes on this first, and then I will turn it back to City Council for any other discussion on the policy itself that's in front of the council. But we do have some other policy considerations. Right now, what we've identified, but we do want to get City Council feedback if there's anything else you would like staff to look at and bring back. One is general fund reserve levels. Right now, council has an adopted policy of 30%. And so we have heard and we do want to take that into consideration and potentially bring up other recommendations back to City Council based on best practices as well as what other agencies are doing in our area, and really look at some of the comparatives on that. The other identified policy, and reading through some of the other policies that both Mark Walsh and I had gone through, was use of one-time revenues. So very specific guidelines, policy guidelines for the council and for the staff regarding use of those one-time revenues. Use of fund balance in excess of established reserves. I did see several policies out there where at the end of the fiscal year, once the audited financials are completed, some councils did have specific policies in place for what to do with those funds after the audited financials are completed to make sure that we are using our resources that are coming in, but also, being very mindful of reserve levels. Two other items that council members have expressed interest in was capital facilities and improvement policies, as well as additional capital improvement program policies, more than what's identified right now inside of the financial policies. And I do want to note the last two items. They will either be working really closely in connection with Public Works Department, or they may be considered a separate policy initially initiated through Public Works. We know both CIP as well as financial side of things, they work very closely together. So we do want to look at where those policies are best housed, but we also don't want to lose sight of the importance of maybe shoring up some of those policies. So the next slide. So again, the council action tonight is we're making the recommendation of the approval of revision number 3 to financial policy. And in addition, I'm just looking for council feedback and direction on any other policy considerations to be brought back at a later time. And with that, I will hand it back over to Mayor Ellsworth.
Thank you. And thank you for this really detailed work here. So we're looking at two aspects. One is the work on this policy, and then direction in terms of looking at the other policies. Is there any initial council comment here? I think if we separate the two and perhaps have a discussion on the specific work here done, and then circle back on what we want to do moving forward. Any council comment on looking at this specific policy and the updates coming through? I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank everyone who worked on these policy change recommendations and the staff report. This is really outstanding work and very helpful to me in thinking about how we're doing what we're doing and what can be improved. I have one small change to propose, and this is in C, under the capital improvement program at number 5. I would modify the second sentence in that paragraph to read, it should also identify which capital needs the agency will fund, when it will fund them, and from what resource. My own sense is that there's no gain from characterizing the degree of difficulty, but really the point is what we expect to see in the capital improvement budget. And I think the substantive change here that the budget should show which capital needs will be funded, when they will be funded, and from what resources is really important. So I'd like to tighten that up to focus on the substance. Thank you.
Councilmember Hardy, would you be able to, I'm sorry, Mr. McCann?
I think we're on the same point there, Mr. Mayor. Just so everybody's on the same page, literally, I think Mr. Hardy was speaking to page 5 of 21 in the red line administrative policy, section C, capital improvement, number 5. Do I have that correct, Councilmember Hardy?
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you.
And then would you be so kind as to repeat what you recommend that say? You're muted, sorry.
That doesn't work very well, does it?
No.
I propose that the second sentence read, it should also identify which capital needs the agency will fund, when it will fund them, and from what resource. And I would be happy to put that in an email if that were if the council likes to make that change, and that would be helpful to staff. I've got it written in my notes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Jin?
Thank you. If council wishes to adopt the proposed revision as part of the policy, and it can amend the resolution or the policy accordingly with that change. But to clarify, would you like the second sentence to be replaced entirely with what you stated? Or would you like that provision added and then keep the remainder of that sentence?
Well,
I'm sorry, actually, I'm good. I think it's in its entirety, so we are good. Thank you.
Any other council input on that point? And then I see Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Hall, were you making comment about this point or?
No, I was just going to concur with that point, but I had some other comments. I'll defer to Councilmember Shuto.
I agree with that. I think it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, so I believe there's support for that. Any objection or further discussion on that point? Yeah, I'm seeing none, and we'll open it for public comment here in a few minutes. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Metz. Great updates to the policy. I believe there's probably a number of folks involved in it. Really appreciate the work. I think it's much better. I'm actually in that same capital improvement program section right in the middle of page 5 of 21, item C. I'm looking at item C2, and I'm just curious if here, or perhaps it's later, with working with Public Works on the rest of the capital improvement items, we could develop a project phase methodology that helps us understand the level of confidence we have in the project estimate. Obviously, early on, it's basically a ballpark. As we move through some phase methodology that we can all agree to, when we get to execution or a bid's in and the project's initiated, then we've gone from whatever, 10% level of confidence in the number to 90 or 95% level of confidence. And maybe there's a couple of other phases in there, pre-bid, bid, et cetera, that we might be able to build in. I also had...
Councilmember Hall, I'm seeing Mr. McCann with a hand up. Maybe a clarification on this point, and then we'll go back to your next point.
Okay.
Sure. I think that Mr. Rincon can probably give you a quick answer. There's a standard practice in capital project design. It's tied to percentage, 25% design, 35, 40, 60, 90, et cetera. Mark, can you explain that so that we can understand exactly how that works and how that gives you confidence in estimating?
Sure. During budgeting and early on, before the project's just conceptual, we kind of put a cost estimate together. It's not really a cost, it's a budgetary number more than anything else. And it's a level of effort, basically, roughly this is how much it's going to cost. It could be, plus 50%. It's just, that's the confidence level at that point. As we continue to develop, the project and it works through the design phases, the engineer will start to produce a 30%, design level cost estimate and work from there up to the bid phase where we have an engineer's estimate that goes out. And that's just based on, recent record. And of course, the problem we're having right now is the inflation. We just can't keep up with the cost estimates. They come in and they surprise us that they're much higher than the engineer's estimate.
Thank you very much. I figured that there was a probably several different options for establishing that, and I was really deferring to you on whatever your preference is. I just think it'd be helpful in looking at estimates. I just had a follow-up for Dr. Mitz on C10, funding capital improvements, 10A, pay as you go. First of all, thank you for the extensive list here. I think it's fantastic. The pay as you go, is this envisioned perhaps as a separate fund? And the reason, what's motivating my question is the need for capital reserves. Before COVID, staff recommended that council establish, set aside $1 million or $2 million in a variety of different civic and street programs. We haven't done that. And I'm thinking that perhaps that bucket could be something that's similar to a pay-as-you-go, where it could be used for routine maintenance items or smaller capital projects that Public Works can just start working off their list, so long as they understand that there's a bucket here that's available for that sort of smaller task, discretionary sort of funding as they go. Is that a separate fund like that could be set up?
Don't tell our auditors this, but yes, they're very critical of how many funds we have right now.
Okay.
Typically right now through the budgetary process is we do have some pay-as-you-go cash paid projects. And what we've done in the past is if it's something that's general fund supported, specifically street, stormwater, any civic projects, we transfer the money from the general fund operating budget and we transfer it right into the CIP fund. So we actually have 4 different CIP funds. We have one for civic, streets, water, wastewater. So we do set aside those specifics. But one of the items where, for potential further consideration is capital facilities and improvement policies, and maybe setting up more of a fund that's basically is taking the depreciation of the asset. If it's depreciating at $200,000 a year, we put that right into a specific fund for that. So we can definitely set it up that way. And I have seen some policies, but again, luckily our auditors are not on the line today, so they can't get upset about that many more funds.
That sounds terrific. Thank you. I just had another comment or two. I know our auditors don't like funds, but I think it's difficult to keep everything in one large bucket like the general fund and be able to track it. It's difficult for a standard reader to understand what's happening, and for I think the council, frankly, and perhaps even the public to understand some of the money movement. You do a great job tracking what you have, and certainly today's budget report that we'll look at a little bit later helps us navigate that. But I was thinking, even there, if we had a separate fund that could be set up that was essentially an emergency reserve or a revenue stabilization bucket, where the council, instead of, there's been a lot of conversation about, well, what's our reserve level? What's our reserve level? Well, maybe what we do is look at the general fund as what do we need to run the city on sort of a stabilized level. And then we have a bucket set up in case we have unforeseen emergencies, if we have firestorms, if we have whatever it happens to be, a recession, et cetera. At least there's something set aside 2, 3, 4 months equivalent revenue that's available for us to draw on should we hit a flat patch like that. And that way we don't have to go back through the entire budget and start chopping and whacking stuff apart. I think that becomes very cumbersome. And to provide a little bit more clarity, similarly, there's noise in the data in the general fund around these non-recurring revenue and non-recurring expense items. And I loved the list that you put together. I think it's a great list to come back to. But my wish would be that we extract non-recurring revenue and expense items from the general fund net position calculation. So we look at net position as a stabilized operating profile. What does it normally typically look like? Every once in a while, we get a lump sum in that's non-recurring. It's a one-time revenue, and there should be some bucket or some way of identifying what that is. And same thing with one-off expenses, which we have routinely, but they're non-recurring. So we can extract some of that noise and say, what do we really have flowing in? What's typically flowing out? And then we have these adjustment buckets over here. It might help provide more clarity to us.
Councilmember Hall,
I would love to see some policy around that.
Thank you. If I may just
Thank
jump
you.
in for a moment, just in terms of keeping things on track here. If we look at this resolution as we have it, and then our next section of this is talking about relooking at these policies coming up. So thank you. I think that those ideas and suggestions are really welcome. I just want to make sure when we get to the next section that those are memorialized. So if folks are okay in terms of where we are, I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Oh, I think I jumped ahead of you, but I'm going to move approval of the resolution if that's where you were going.
I think that's where we are. I just need to make sure that we've opened this to public comment.
Oh,
and
right.
I'm not
Thank
sure we
you.
have. So I'll look to our city clerk.
There are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you. So I want to just make one comment here. I see Council Member or Vice Mayor Dorian, but I just want to make sure in terms of our messaging to the public that, whether our auditors are on or not, we always want to be consistent with best practice. I just want to make sure that our messaging to the public is that's our way of moving forward at all times. So I'm seeing Council or Vice Mayor Doring, and then I'll circle back to Councilmember Chateau in terms of a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just an inquiry of Councilmember Hardy. I need a little bit more clarification on the point you were making about C5 Capital Improvement Program. So I think it's a good addition to identify the project. I just maybe I don't have clarity and don't have a full understanding of what this paragraph is meant to do, but I want to make sure it does not exclude those projects that we have identified, but we have no idea where the funding is going to be or when it's going to be. But we know there's a project that's needed. I don't want to exclude that by the language, and maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. I just want to make sure that we're identifying all projects, even if we have not been able to identify the funding or the timing, so that they're on the radar list. And that's my point there. And maybe that's what you're getting at also.
Councilmember Hardy, some clarification?
I really was not trying to change the substance of that paragraph at all, but rather to tighten up the wording. So whether you support my change or not, this paragraph calls for the budget to identify, it's the word I'm proposing to use, but it's the same either way. Right now, it says it should also make the difficult decision regarding which capital needs the agency will fund, when it will fund them, and from what resource. I'm proposing that it read, it should also identify which capital needs the agency will fund, when it will fund them, and from what resource. So I think, Vice Mayor Doring, you've identified a concern that is untouched by the change that I proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to look to Ms. Jin. She had maybe a clarification.
Just to confirm that if council wish to make that change to the second sentence. And again, to clarify, it would be page 5 of policy PFI-0016. And it would be C5 sentence 2. And the proposed amendment would be to replaced in its entirety to read, it should also identify which capital needs the agency will fund, when it will fund them, and from what resource. That would need to be part of the proposed motion, if council wish.
Thank you. And I see you, Councilmember Hall. I'll circle right to you, but I want to just mention in what Vice Mayor Doring brought up. One of the things our former city manager, Mark Presswich, really helped us understand was we can move forward getting projects shovel ready. And often that helps get the funding if a funder sees that we've done the work in prepping the project. I believe that's where Vice Mayor Doring is coming from. But as Councilmember Hardy says, his suggestions don't interfere with that at all. So am I clear in that?
Well, my suggestion simply doesn't change the substance of the additional policy language here with respect to identifying which capital needs the agency will fund, when it will fund them, and from what resource. So my change simply doesn't address the concern that you and Vice Mayor Doring may share, if I understand your comments correctly. It
Okay.
doesn't add or subtract anything related to that concern.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Can I jump in for one second? I was just
please.
thinking that actually the language in that is a little weird. It's reads a capital improvement budget. Further up under C1, there's a whole separate note that says the CIP is really not a budget. It's a list of things that is used for planning. So I know that we have just published our first CIP in years. Thank you, Director Rincon and Dr. Mitz, where the CIP is actually sized to resources and our ability to deliver. So that's a wonderful improvement. And somewhere in here, I don't know if it was this document or later when we'll talk about the budget, there's a reference to a much broader comprehensive list that is not really the 5-year CIP. It's sort of, here's this other wish list that we're all aware of, that of items that have been identified in reports, commissions, task forces, et cetera, in which I think we looked at as part of our budget workshop. And the last I recall, that was up around 140 or 150 million dollars. And I think council had some additional comments. So that list, I think, is a list where we have a project identified, and maybe funding, maybe not at all. But those long items haven't yet transferred to perhaps a 5-year CIP, where things are going to be a little bit more focused on, are we actually able to deliver or not? And that will be really up to Director Rincon and his team to determine. And then at which point, I think some of this language would kick back in that is CIP specific. So maybe to Dr. Mitz's point earlier about Public Works and Finance working together on those other 2 CIP items at some point down the road here in terms of policy, that gets fleshed out a little bit better in terms of what actually goes on each one of these lists. That, anyway, I'm just trying to help unbundle that. a
Yeah,
little bit.
no, excellent points. Thank you. So with that, do we feel we have clarity to move forward and consensus to move forward with the language? Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. Ms. Jen?
I did hear a motion that was earlier, and I believe that that was as is.
Oh, it was as it, so we need to
No.
talk about.
No, the motion that I'm going to make is to approve the attached resolution for the financial policy and include Councilmember Hardy's revision. I'm happy to say it if you want me to say it. No, all right, as previously stated by Ms. Jen. Thank you.
And I'm seeing Mr. McCann.
I'll second that.
Just a moment, I'm seeing Mr. McCann, just wondering if there's some clarification that needs to happen from the city manager. Mute. You're
Sorry, go ahead with your second. I just have a comment before you vote.
Okay.
Okay, I'll
we have
second the motion.
Okay, we have a
Great.
second, and then Mr. McCann.
I just wanted to make sure, April, that the direction that we have a motion relative to the resolution and the policies, and we also have direction to return to council at a future date for a discussion item that would identify sort of the universe of other financial policies to review, refine. So we're not taking action on that tonight, but we do have direction to return for that discussion. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very good. And I'll just, and I see Councilmember Hardy, I just want to make clear that I think everybody will have input on those other items. And just as we have that discussion, that will be the time to really bring in the specifics. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It was my understanding from the from your lead-in to this discussion that we were going to focus on the recommended changes, take action there, and then discuss what it is we would like brought back with respect to the other policies. So
Yes,
wrong,
I concur.
I want to
Yes.
make comments now, but if I'm right, then I'm ready to vote.
So I'll look to Mr. McCann. My thought was to make this vote, and then we have a conversation in terms of direction on those other policies. Does that sound appropriate, or should we just have that conversation and look at that list in conjunction with this? I just didn't want to get the items tangled up.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So our staff report does say to adopt the resolution, provide additional direction in regards to other policy considerations to be brought back to council for consideration. So you're correct, Mr. Hardy. I was just noting that we will be bringing it back. So if you don't have your list of financial policies that you're interested in, tonight's not the only opportunity. If you have some areas that you are interested in, let us know and we'll get working on it. When we come back, we'll have some work on that, but we'll have the whole bundle of policies for you to have a conversation about, provide some input, direction, and then we'll have a subsequent discussion where we will return with some recommended language changes. So a couple of different opportunities to bite at this particular apple.
Councilmember Hardy, are you comfortable with that? Do you want to put some comment in here?
Oh, I think that discussion should follow the roll call as suggested by the staff report, and I'm good with it.
Okay, very good. So we'll do the roll call and then we'll move back to that. Cindy, the mute, please.
Councilor Chateau,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Absolutely, yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everybody, for the focus on that. And Dr. Mitz, excellent work. Really appreciate it. And our finance team, really appreciate it. So if you could put back up that list that we were looking at a little bit earlier of potential policies to look at. And we can start there and sort of see where the discussion goes. I think we don't want to get too in depth. We'll all have different thoughts here, but if we look at the general places we want to approach.
Yes, Cindy, can you allow me to share my screen? Perfect. So hopefully everyone can see the screen. So these are the items that we had identified based on what I've been hearing council discussion regarding some of the financial policies, in particular, the general fund reserve levels, as well as other things that as I've been going through other financial policies, maybe tightening up some language on use of one-time revenues, use of fund balance in excess of the established reserves, capital facilities and improvement policies. And again, I do want to note, make a comment on Mayor Ellsworth's comments before. Everything that we do is in accordance with good, sound financial policies. I just know sometimes our auditors don't like the amount of funds that we have. It doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong by the amount of funds that we have. It just means we have separate pockets of money for a little bit of everything. And then also looking at capital improvement program policies. Based on some of the discussion earlier tonight, I have taken notes on maybe making a determination on how to establish net position, on which numbers you use, because right now for net position, how you get the percentage or your unrestricted fund balance is you take whatever's left in the fund balance and you divide it by your expenses for the year, and that's what gets you your percentage. And so maybe adding some different language or memorializing what metrics we use in determining that position, as well as I did hear some of the feedback on updating to potentially include other language for capital projects, so not necessarily part of the established 5-year CIP plan, but also maybe memorialize that we do keep an ongoing 30-year list, whether it's funded or not funded. We don't want to lose sight of some of those important things. So based on that, I would love any other council feedback and direction, and also would like to, ask council's feedback on if they would like to establish a working group of 1 or 2 council members, or if we want to data dump ideas with me, I can work with Mandy Kellogg and we'll bring it back at a later date for future discussion.
I'm going to open it to council in just a moment. I had a few thoughts. First, I think that Councilmember Hall, in some of his comments earlier, was finding a really good way of defining some of the issues and separations. As I was looking at it, it was, how do we define the difference between our reserves and our unrestricted general fund? And then that will help us determine how to, where we are. I think Councilmember Hall had some good suggestions about how to really look at that. My thought is looking towards some type of a special meeting where when we come back with these policies, we're really singularly focused on these financial policies because of the nuances and the sort of the interconnectedness of them may take some special focus. That's my thought as we all put our ideas in, and perhaps our finance team helps lay out what a special meeting talking about these different policies. That's just a thought that I'm having right now because it's so critical that if we're all in that same headspace together, I think we'll be able to find some really good ways to balance things. Any council comment here? Councilmember Hall. And then Councilmember.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for your comments earlier. And thank you, Dr. Mitz, for your openness to a variety of different ideas and other ways of going about this. I like the idea of having a special session on it. I think that'd be helpful. I think once Dr. Mitz has a chance to sort of compile, and her whole team to compile perhaps other thoughts or processes here, then maybe all that comes back to either to a subcommittee group, like you've said, or this entire group in a special session where we can really focus on those changes together. So I like that. I think there's a number of ways of of tackling all of these things. I know I've written language on quite a bit of it, including use of one-time revenues, our reserve levels, not just establishing a level, but thinking about how do we actually manage that level that makes it really clear for all of us in our decision making. And then also use of fund balance in excess of established reserves. I like that idea a lot. I view that as part of sort of a one-time revenue policy. And then similarly, on the capital facilities improvement side, I think having that 30-year project list is very, very important, and that whether it's funded or not. And then obviously, I think that and the last item here, CIP policies, both will help feed into this work that she's identified as part of this long-term financial plan going forward. How do we fund these things, and how do we get it done? What transfers off the big list onto a CIP list, and then which of those elements are actually funded? Anyway, so I don't know the best way forward, but I think there's quite a bit here, and I like the initial take on it that she's got. I think it's terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. Well, I certainly do want to address the subject of general fund reserve levels at the contemplated future meeting. And I have to say that I'm not at all convinced that looking at what other communities do really gives us the right sort of information. It seems to me that we will have a much better understanding of where we've been and where we might wish to be if we focus instead on our own financial history. And specifically, from my perspective, that means examining what has happened in the last several economic downturns where municipal revenues were affected. We have the most recent one with, involving principally COVID, and that, that isn't necessarily over, but we certainly have data now as to, what the initial downturn looked like, and we do seem to be rebounding from that in terms of revenues. So I think there's good data there. There's plenty of information about how the city was affected financially by the Great Recession, and that being such a big event, it seems to me it would be useful to go back one downturn earlier to get a perspective. And I think if we have data from 3 cycles, then we have some perspective with which to go forward. But if all we do is look at, what other communities' reserve policies are, and we don't understand how the recessions and downturns played out in those communities, we don't really know whether those are good policies to emulate or not. So those are my thoughts on that. And that's what I'd like to see come back. Thank you.
And I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring and then Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up with excellent comments by Councilmember Hardy. I do agree with the proposition that it's really not very useful ultimately to look to other communities to establish our own reserve policies. I think, these reserve policies in of themselves sort of assume that we are putting aside monies for the various pots of reserves that we need, like, for example, equipment or capital improvements or facilities rehabilitation and maintenance. And so when you look at another community's reserve policy, it may be 100%. Oh, wow. But then you get into the weeds and you realize maybe they don't have any reserves for equipment or very little, or capital improvements. And so it's really hard to judge that. You couldn't really compare that apples to apples. So fundamentally, I agree that you look back, right, at the downturns, as Councilmember Hardy suggests, over a couple cycles to see how that worked out. But for me, I think we need to look at risk going forward of other things that may not have existed maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I don't know, this is a question, as I'm making my comments, a question for the experts on our staff, Mr. McCann and Dr. Mitz and others. How do we identify risk? Is that something that council members who are not experts in risk identification do, but are there folks out there who can come into a community and say, you know, here's the size of your community, here's where you are, here's your situation with, you know, what comes to mind is fire risk, climate change risk, not having a sufficient water supply. Those are the kinds of risks that I don't know of anybody here, maybe I'm wrong, but has the ability, it's almost like an insurance sort of situation where they come in and manage the risk and say, here's how much money you need to set aside for these various risks. And so the question is, how do we go about identifying risk? I think if we can focus on that problem going forward, it will help us. And I just don't have enough information on how other communities go through that process. I think it would be a very revealing process for us. I don't want to scare the heck out of the community, but I think we do need to have a better sense of what the risks are, rather than sort of just this general notion of what the risk is. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see addition? I have a few comments. I saw Councilmember Hall and then Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. And thank you, Vice Mayor, for your comments. There's lots of ways to do that, actually, and there are, you know, insurance related type people who do that. You know, one risk we don't talk much about here, but we should, because it's tied to our climate action work, it's tied to our environmental work, and that is energy, PG&E prices, the grid going down, right? We're already receiving all kinds of emails from PG&E because they're planning on PSPS events coming up this fall, and this will likely continue for years to come. And so I like to look at the Upper Valley as we have a very, very small community here. We should be able to generate a lot of our own power using sustainable means, and certainly provide and reduce risks to our wastewater treatment facilities, our power plants, etc. Not only in St. Helena, but for the Veterans Home, for Yountville, for Calistoga, here in the Upper Valley. If we can start thinking a little bit differently about becoming much more energy self-reliant, not being completely off the grid, but I think there's lots of ways to bolster that and make sure that we don't lose power. And I think you can make some very quick and easy assessments of what's the cost to us when we lose power, what sort of scramble do we all go through, and what does it cost to reduce that risk. So I like those ideas. I'm just forgetting some other thought I had here. I mean, that's it for now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think if we don't get too deep into the subjects, but just putting these thoughts forward about areas of exploration as we move forward. I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, from my perspective, I would like to see our reserve levels, that data, how it compares to a few other cities. That's helpful information for me, because we do know, you know, we're not going to know in the weeds what happens in their cities, but we know in general where revenue comes from. And we have to make some hard decisions moving forward in terms of what we can fund now and what we need to put in reserves. And I like to just have an idea of what's going on in a couple of other cities. That's helpful information to me, along with what Councilmember Hardy brought up in terms of looking at our own information and what's happened in the past with recessions and how we've bounced back and what we've needed and where perhaps we wish we had more because we weren't able to fund staff positions and then we couldn't do important services and we're still playing catch up from that. So all of that's good information. I just know from my perspective in making decisions, I like to have a couple benchmarks in there and would appreciate that research. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall, but I want to see if City Manager McCann has some clarification here.
Thank you. I was just going to comment on the Vice Mayor's question about risks. It's very interesting. As he was speaking at first, I thought, oh my gosh, like, I don't know. There's so many. But I think there are processes to do that. And I think an excellent one is just what the community has told us and what the council knows. And part of that is going through a strategic planning session where you all throw things out about concerns. And so that goes to sort of the old style, SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you look at that and just start thinking, very broadly, I think that can be a source of an area to identify things. So as you were talking, I was just thinking some things that are not your normal kind of item that you might include, but staffing, the ability to attract and retain staff. That's a risk, that's a threat, that's a weakness that we have. Air quality impacts from wildfires, not even in our area, but far away, they affect us. The fact that we're a bit more diverse in our economic base than others, but tourism and agriculture are it. And so a lot of our eggs are in the basket of wine and wine country and tourism. Access and circulation, we've got limited access and circulation. Those are facts, but those are threats, those are weaknesses that we have. And you can go on and on with that kind of thinking. That, though, will provide the inputs, the information for a strategy. How do we want to address those things? How do we want to address weaknesses in the community, whether it's communication or diversity or engagement with different factors of our community, social justice, equity? All of those things are things that you may not normally have on the list, but we could put them on the list, and then you could develop a deliberate strategic plan to try to address those things, which takes money, takes energy, takes goals, takes emphasis. But I think it's an excellent point. I think it would be an excellent conversation for the council to have as part of the strategic planning session. And you take those and you put them together with the kind of hard, concrete infrastructure things and the other service needs, and then you've got a full package, and you can identify the funding necessary and then identify which funds should go toward what type of service, improvement, and activity you want to pursue. So I think it's a really great idea.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. I thought terrific comments all the way around there. Wonderful. And I just did remember when Councilmember Chateau was talking, what my earlier point was, comparing us to other cities. One thing to keep in mind here in the Upper Valley is our revenue by source. Our TOT is fairly small compared to both Calistoga and Yountville. So they're going to have a lot more impact in a downturn than we are. Our most stable source, of course, is property taxes. It's our biggest chunk. Actually, I think our budget, we just jumped higher on sales tax. So sales tax and property tax aren't going to swing as much as revenues are in Yountville, for instance. So that's a blessing on one hand, because it means in a downturn, well, our property taxes are likely to provide basically a floor for us. On the other hand, when inflation is ripping like it is right now, our revenue stream really is property taxes, which are just going to go up 3 or 4%. And we know inflation is moving at 8, 9, 10%, twice or 3 times that pace right now. So it becomes also an opportunity for us. How do we look at closing that gap in the future? So that was my only comment there. Thank you.
Thank you. All excellent input. And I think part of a discussion that I do believe needs to be a full council special meeting. Perhaps from that, a subcommittee could peel off, but I do think it needs to be a full council discussion. I see the value in both looking at our town specifically, our specific history, but also the idea of benchmarking, of seeing ourselves in context. It's a silly little example is if I never saw another human being, I might think I'm the tallest person in the world. But when I see myself in relation to other people, I know sort of where I stand. So I think a combination would be excellent of looking at us specifically and then in context, and that's part of the larger package of these financial policies is so important to get inside of. So if we're okay with where we are in the conversation, I do think I'm going to need to open this part of the conversation to public comment just to see if there's any comment on this, because we sort of separated it. I'll just look to our city clerk.
There are no hands raised.
So no hands raised. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council. If we're all agreed that we want to see these come forward, as Mr. McCann says, a number of bites at this apple. So anybody that has input where this wants to go, please submit it, and then we will package this and bring it back. And my suggestion of a special meeting, I just think it's going to take that kind of attention. So with that, Mr. McCann, do you feel like you have direction?
Yes, I think so. A really exciting conversation. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, April, for the good work on the financial policies to date. I will speak with April and with our new city manager about this and suggest to Mr. Canello that he have a conversation with the mayor and vice mayor about how best to bring this forward, because I do think a special meeting would be the appropriate setting. I do think there's some advantage to having a broader topic or a broader agenda that might be looking at some strategic planning as well, so we can have things aligned. But we'll figure that out. I think we've got a really good input and direction, so thank you.
Very good. We'll move. Oh, I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you. Just one other comment before we move on. I do think I agree with Councilmember Chateau that benchmarking is a good idea. I'm not intending to dismiss that. I think most people who know me know that I typically tend to do that. And I've done that over the course of 8 years on a whole host of variety of issues in terms of how we compare to Yountville and Calistoga. And obviously I'm very familiar with Calistoga. So even if I don't express that publicly, I have a good internal sense of what's going on in this city or where I am. So I just wanted to make sure that we caution when we do benchmarking that we have a fair comparison. All information is good information, so I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And before we move to our next item here, I just want to mention, and we'll circle back on this at the end of the meeting, but I don't want folks to forget who may be on this will be Mr. McCann's last meeting with us. And want to be sure to say thank you properly to him. We'll do that at the end of the meeting, but I just wanted to make that note. So anybody who's on the meeting will hopefully stick around as we get to the end and able to really express our gratitude. So with that, then we will move to item 9.2. And this is consideration of proposed approval of the following resolutions related to the Napa Valley College tenant improvements, C22-0001. I'll look to our city attorney. Am I to read this entire list here?
It would be fine to read the resolutions.
The resolutions.
So I think, Mr. Mayor, when we have an action to adopt resolution number 1, for instance, we would read the title of that resolution at that time.
Okay, so
you need not read it at this point.
Okay, very good. So we have a number of resolutions relating to the Napa Valley College tenant improvements, C22-0001, and this was prepared by Priya Nixon, our assistant to the city manager. And I don't know if Ms. Nixon or Mr. McCann is going to lead us into.
I think we're both going to bring this forward. I'd just like to say a few things. One, I want to thank Priya in particular for really good work. This is work that in her capacity as assistant to the city manager, she's really a utility player, and she gets exposed to all sorts of things that frequently she has not had experience working on. And so a facility agreement, a lease, the various design work, the contract work, all of this is work that really was new to her. I think she's done a remarkable job to try to herd all of these cats together and to work with different staff to bring it forward. So I thank Priya for her good work and congratulate her on that. This is an exciting project. It's one that the council has been quite interested in. And it's been a bumpy road to get to this point. A lot of complications, a lot of things outside of our control, some surprises, but I think at the end of the day, a good opportunity for the city, certainly for the staff, and for the service that we can provide to the community. So this is not the final step. We've got a lot more to do, but this is an important step to allow us to move forward. While there are costs involved here, you'll see in our budget that we've identified appropriate funding mechanisms for those costs, and we think with all things considered that this is an appropriate measure for us to take and an appropriate action for us to take. So I'd like Priya to just give us a quick summary of the 5 items that we have before you. We're not going to go into great detail on them. I know you're familiar with the things. If you do have questions, though, we'd be happy to go into whatever detail you desire. So Priya, thank you again. And would you tell us about these 5, please?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Mr. McCann, thank you for providing those introductory comments and for those kind words. I appreciate your leadership as well. So I'd really like to thank everyone who has helped us get to this point. This item is really a culmination of actions, as Mr. McCann stated, for the city to move forward with the tenant improvements for the move to the Napa Valley College. And I do have to say that this is probably one of the longest titles for a staff report that I've written. And I think just to echo what Mr. McCann said, that this project has been a little bit more complicated than anticipated. And, we have found that as applicable to all of the projects here, that costs have escalated. However, we have reviewed diligently and evaluated the proposed contracts and believe that moving forward will allow the city to make the necessary tenant improvements. So I have provided a detailed staff report that has broken down the 5 different resolutions, and I'm just going to very briefly go over what they are. So the first one is for the tenant improvement work, which will be done by the general contractor. So we did have a bid opening occur on June 15th, and we received 4 bids for that, and we are recommending approval of award to Murray Building, Inc. The second component, and a very critical component for this project, includes the IT improvements that need to happen to bring the IT up to meet the operational needs of both the city administration and also the police department. So this includes some new cabling, network build out, and then relocation services. And we have been utilizing Marin IT, and Marin IT has submitted a proposal for this component. And then another component that's very important for the police department is the lease of a portable locker room unit. And we have found we have been working with a JPA that has provided an opportunity for us to get something that will meet the security needs for a portable unit for the police department. And then I'll just say as a reminder, this is actually a project that's under the umbrella of the Division of State Architect. And we have an architect of record, and we've been working with a construction management firm that's helped us get the project to this point. And we need construction administration support from the architect of record, and then construction management support, which is typical for any capital project. And this will be done with, we're proposing with Greystone West. They are a CM firm who is very familiar with St. Helena, and both the AOR and the CM firm know the DSA very well. So I just went over to the college yesterday. I go over quite a bit, as you can imagine. And I just would like to say that this will be a fantastic home for the city staff, and we are all very excited about this. It truly will be a community hub, and we look forward to welcoming everyone. And I'd like to thank the college for their continued partnership and assistance as we get ready to move forward with the next step. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I may need a little additional clarification as we go here. Are there initial council comments, input here at this point? I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this, Priya. Good work. I do agree that we need to do this. The costs are just outstanding. I mean, really extraordinary when you look at that total number. And we know that we need to have a good, safe place, not only for all of our city staff, but all of the extra costs for our police department and safety are so important. I just, when I'm looking at this number and thinking about how we only have a 5-year lease with the 2 years, I want to encourage us to keep moving forward with conversations either to purchase the building or to extend that lease, because this amount of cost to me does not make sense unless we have that lease extend out farther than what we currently have. So I am in support of all of these, and of course want to hear public comment before making my final determination, but want to raise that because I think it's really important that we get more, that we recognize this kind of investment that our city is making in this very important space for our community. And I agree with Priya, it can be such an asset to our community for community space and everything that can happen there. And we need to make sure that we really get the value out of everything that we're investing.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just wanted to concur with Councilmember Chateau. I think it's the real question behind this. Priya, thank you for all your work. I know that the costs aren't you personally. It's just the nature of this type of work and also our environment today. But you know, we're up 4.5 times over the original estimate just 1 year ago. It's quite a change. So, but I think Councilmember Chateau has hit the nail on the head. What are we doing long term for our home? I think this is going to be a wonderful setup. It takes us a long time to make decisions in this space with public assets and a long time to make changes to wherever we're going next. So my personal preference, of course, is let's continue to work with the college on acquiring this space if possible, or extending the lease out for a much longer term. But we need to look at what's our long-term play here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I just have initially a question for staff regarding the fiscal impact of approval of the 5 resolutions. Unless I'm bad at my own math, the total in that part of the staff report titled fiscal impact does not include the authorization of 10% change orders on the general contract. So my own sort of intuitive response to looking at the resolutions individually is to want to add that 10% because the resolution authorizes it. But my mind and ears are both open. Thank you.
Is there any clarification from staff on that point?
So if I can just chime in here, I'll look to April. I know the resolution, certainly to your point, Councilmember Hardy does call out the 10%. April, do you have any comments on that part of the fiscal impact? Because I believe it is part of the overall project budget. Is that correct?
It is, the 10% is included in the overall project budget. So as we noted in the staff report that's coming next for the budget increase, that does include the 10% contingency if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional council comment here. I'm certainly supportive of this moving forward. The costs are attention getting, but I believe we need to move this forward. I just want to take a moment to thank Vice Mayor Doring for his work on this and others who helped really put this together. It's a challenge. I agree with Councilmember Hall looking towards what we can do long-term. This is a wonderful opportunity. The site is a wonderful site, and also the opportunity to work with our partners, Napa Valley College. And this was also an incredible asset during the pandemic, working with the hospital, et cetera. So I just think, and the sooner we can get our staff into this wonderful space, that's the goal here, is if we can make this transition so that everybody's got a workspace that they're proud of and works well. Just two other comments. It also, that proximity to the river and that special area that's also near the community forest, but looking at giving us an eye towards restoration of habitat in that area. We've learned that things like beaver habitat build fire resiliency. It creates a lushness, which helps with other habitat. So just having our city administration close to that area, I think will bring attention to that. And then something Councilmember Chateau brought up recently about our efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, and looking at the true heritage of Napa Valley and St. Helena with the Chinese heritage, the Latino heritage, also looking at our indigenous heritage. And this place, this spot by the river was and is such an important part of the indigenous culture here that I think that as we move our city administration there, attention's going to just naturally come to these things. And I think we'll see a fruition in that area as well. So I'm very supportive of this and want to see it happen as soon as we can make it happen. I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring, and then I'll open it to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council members, for your support. Just one question for staff with respect to the construction contract and the facility that's used for the locker rooms and showers for the police department. I want to make sure that is protected. So can someone speak to that? Is it going to be enclosed by a wall or a fence or something? Because I noticed, some discussion in some of the documents about the materials that it's constructed with, and it seems to me that it's vulnerable if it's not enclosed or protected in some form or fashion. So that's one thing. I don't know if anybody could speak to that. It may be an add-on with the contractor there who's going to be delivering that facility, the construction trailer. That would be something very important for me to ensure that we have the protection of folks using that facility. The point is well taken with respect to the escalation of costs. Absolutely mind-numbing. I do think I want to be sensitive to the negotiators on behalf of the Napa Valley College. As you recall, this project started on a high and it died suddenly because of a public outcry amongst many and a lot of resistance even to get the project on the ground. So those negotiations stalled for several months and we got this project back online. Originally, it wasn't even going to be a 5-year lease. The 2 years was not presented. I do agree that in order to get the value out of the monies we're expending, we definitely need to engage with the college folks, in short order, but also be sensitive to the political reality that's going on with respect to the use of the college and its own mission. So we have to kind of balance that out. I'd be happy to continue with that dialogue and work with another council member on that. I do think freeing up the space at Railroad Avenue and frankly, ultimately Main Street is a big win for us. Those are two assets that the city has that are obviously underutilized. And so it almost is a jumpstart for both of those, Railroad and Main Street, to say, okay, I know the police movement will be a little slower with respect to dispatch, but it would be nice to just demolish what's on Main Street and have a fresh look at that. And then also really look hard at what uses we can make with Railroad. And until we make the move, we really can't commit to either one of those. So I think it's a really important milestone for the city. But I'd be happy to continue to work with the college. And the idea is to become a good partner over time, pay our bills, work with the college, have a lot of interaction with the college in terms of the partnerships that we can develop over time in terms of what their mission is and what our mission is. And I agree with Councilmember Hall, it would be a nice property to acquire over time. One of the things I'm disappointed in as I look back, I was just trying to find is funds. What other funds besides general fund monies could we use? And I asked the question probably 5 times, and I kept getting disappointed with the answers, but that is looking at our impact fees and seeing if we can use any of those fees. And frankly, the answer back from our staff and attorneys was, we have an impact fee study and it sort of sets out what we can use those funds for. But it does invite the question whether we should at some point revisit our impact fee study, because we're putting in a tremendous amount of money for basically a city hall, but we don't have the language in our fee study that says, okay, you can use it for this kind of a nuanced purpose. That was not contemplated, at least not directly. And it would be interesting to look at legally what we can do there going forward, especially over 7 years, whether we could revisit that fee study and see if there's any opportunities to use funds other than the general fund. But I'm very excited about this. I do think staff morale is extremely important, and just community wins like this and being on that property will be important for us, but absolutely I am cognizant of the costs. And so hopefully we'll be able to, keep the costs down as much as possible and have no overruns. Does anybody have an idea of when, in terms of the timeline, what the construction timeline is in terms of completion of, is it 5 months, 4 months, 6 months? That would be important. But thank you for, Priya, thank you and staff for bringing this forward. A lot of moving parts. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Nixon.
Yes, thank you so much. So Vice Mayor Doring, to answer your first question about the police portable unit for the locker room. So that will have bulletproofing to keep it safe. And then there'll be a fence around that as well. So to answer your question on that. And then in regards to your question about the construction schedule, so we've actually already been in touch with the contractor. Of course, the contract is still up for consideration tonight. And we've been strategizing on how we can move forward with mobilization and beginning the project. It is slated to be a 60 calendar day project. Of course, we are cognizant of some of the supply chain issues, so we're working on a strategy on that. The priority will be to get the administration wing up first. And then we'll be working with a contractor at the same time to get all of the security measures in place for the police wing as well. So we'll keep you updated on that timeline. But I hope that answers your question on in terms of we're going forward as quickly as we can. And I look forward to providing updates on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nixon. I appreciate it. You did answer my questions.
Thank you. And I'm going to open it to public comment in just a moment. But I do have a thought and something that the Vice Mayor said, and this could be an appropriate place to look at a subcommittee to stay engaged with the college as this moves forward, I'd certainly want to look to our city manager to think about how something like that might be organized in a way that works with staff and the efforts of staff. I know Vice Mayor Doring's been on this for quite a while, so I'd like to see him certainly be part of anything that moves forward, but perhaps we can also look at another council member at some point here to sort of form a team so that we keep those linkages, communication being so important. We're so close, don't want to have things slip because of communication that doesn't happen. So if I look to Mr. McCann here briefly, any thoughts on as this moves forward, and perhaps this is something for our new city manager to help organize, but I want to make sure that whatever we do syncs with staff.
Yes, thank you. I think it's an excellent idea. I have had 2 or 3 conversations with the former interim CEO of the college. And so, myself and interim speaking with another interim about potential things was interesting. And we were, encouraging each other and all of that. But I do think it's absolutely imperative for the council and the city manager to communicate, engage with folks at the college. They're an important landowner. We will be partnering with them. It's a lovely asset. It's something that we ought to determine the best use of it, and I'm sure they would be very open to having a dialogue. So I think it would be a very good idea to have a couple of council members work with city staff and just begin that dialogue with the folks at the college.
Okay, very good. And if
that's not on your agenda tonight, so we won't be appointing anyone tonight. I saw Joanna looking at me.
Yes.
But
that was not my intent. Just to.
I know she's keeping us honest. So we'll bring that back. We certainly have time, and we'll have some opportunities when we move in with a ribbon cutting and some type of celebration to include folks from the college and really just start celebrating our partnership together. So lots to come.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to make sure to open public comment here. I'll look to our city clerk to see if we have input.
There are no raised hands.
Okay, very good. I'll bring it back. We'll see if there's any additional council comment, and then I'll look for a little guidance from Ms. Jin about how I'm going to read these resolutions. I'm seeing no council comments. So I'm looking at right under the recommended action. There's a summary of the resolutions. Is that enough for me to read, or do I need to read the actual resolutions?
I would recommend, as City Manager McCann noted, to read the titles of the resolutions for the record. And you could read them all at once.
Perhaps, I'm sorry, Joanna, but perhaps we can have a motion from a council member to approve the 5 resolutions, a second, and then maybe we can ask Ms. Jin to help us out, and perhaps she can read those for us, if you don't mind.
That would be very nice. Thank you.
Awesome. Sorry.
I'll second.
Thank you. So the motion would be to approve the following resolutions related to the Napa Valley College tenant improvements, C22-0001. The first one approving Murray Building Incorporated of Sonoma, California as the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, authorizing the city manager to execute, enter into, and implement the contract by and between the city and Murray Building Incorporated for project number C22-0001 Napa Valley College tenant improvements in the amount of $1,167,379, and authorizing the Director of Public Works to approve change orders not to exceed 10% of the contract amount. 2, approving a professional services agreement with Marin IT for information technology upgrades and relocation services as part of the Napa Valley College tenant improvements Project C22-001 in an amount not to exceed $219,259.86 and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. 3, approving a 5-year lease agreement with Vesta Modular for the St. Helena Police Department portable locker room for an amount not to exceed $423,956. Fiscal year 22-23, $116,117. Fiscal year 23-24, $58,013. Fiscal year 24-25, $58,013, and fiscal year 25-26, $58,013. Fiscal year 26-27, $133,798, and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. 4, approving amendment number 4 to professional services agreement with Knoll and Tam Architects, STH contract, fiscal year 2021-071 in the amount of $44,923 for construction administration for a total contract amount not to exceed $236,483 and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. 5, approving a professional services agreement with Greystone West Company for construction management services for the Napa Valley College Tenant Improvement Project in an amount not to exceed $70,566.73 and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement.
Thank you for reading that. And we have our motion and our second. So with that, we would look to our roll call.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Chiteau,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody, for the focus on that. Ms. Jin, thank you very much for the reading and the guidance. Really appreciated. And so with that, then we'll move forward to our final item this evening. That's 10.1. This is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. And I will look to Dr. Mitz, our Assistant City Manager, to get us into this item.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm looking at City Manager McCann. Do you have any comments? Oh, and I see Paul.
Oh, I'm saying Vice Mayor Doring.
Would it be appropriate to take a 5-minute break?
Certainly, we can do that. I think we've been at this for a while. So let's do, we'll come back at 8:41. Let's do 8:42, and then we'll see how far we get if we need to extend a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're starting to see folks come back on. We'll be back up and running here fairly soon. Okay, we've got our council coming back on. It looks like we're almost all back. We've got our city manager, our city attorney, our city clerk, and our assistant city manager in terms of presentation. Now we've got our council on. So we'll get back into the meeting here. I want to look to the vice mayor here. Do you think it's of value to vote to extend the meeting a few minutes now so we can try to get through this uninterrupted and hopefully finish up as soon as possible? Or we'll have to call a pause in 10 minutes or so if not.
Yeah, I'll move approval that we extend to 9:15.
I think that hopefully is adequate.
I'll
Is there
second.
a second?
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Okay, so we're at item 10.1. This is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. And this was prepared by Dr. Mitz, our assistant city manager.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
before
Mr.
April,
McKeon, if you would like to lead us in here.
awesome. Yeah, before April gets into her, I think she's got 37 slides tonight. No. I just want to thank April and Mandy and all the staff for the hard work. This budget preparation started before I arrived when Mr. Prestwich was still with the city, and I can attest to lots and lots of work by staff. I think we've got a good budget for the council. It reflects much of the conversation that we had earlier tonight about reserve and choices and being prudent and strategic. I won't go into all of the elements, and neither will April, to be honest. We're going to have a high-level summary because we know that we've already been immersed in this. I will say that we are recommending some use of unallocated funds. We think we've got some needs. We think there's some good argument to utilize those funds. We'd be happy to explain our rationale. You may have a different point of view, and that's okay too. So we'd like to lay that out. If you have a question, we'd like to answer that. So first, thank you, April. Very nice job, you and Mandy, putting this together. So can you walk us through?
Great, thank you very much. And the city clerk will be sharing the presentation with us. And City Manager McCann had one number off. It's actually 137 slides. So we just, okay, before us tonight is the adoption of the fiscal year 22-23 budget. So the first slide, just as City Manager McCann had stated, this budget document did not just magically appear overnight. We do have a lot of steps, and in this particular instance this year, we did start the whole budget process in January. So in front of you is a budget development. I will not review every single line item on here, but you can see that we did take a lot of steps.
Dr. Mitz, if I may interrupt, is it just my screen? This is looking very small to me. Perhaps it's just my screen.
It is very small, and again, I won't go into it in detail, but it's just to show council and show the public all the steps that went into this process. And in addition, how many different how many different departments and elements and subcommittees and staff went into the development of the process. So this is just our budget development calendar. We're in the very last stages of it, where we are bringing the budget for adoption tonight to City Council. Next slide, please. So when we did develop the budget, and this was mentioned in the staff report, but I really wanted to kind of reiterate the thought process that went into the budget. What we did is we did try to align every decision that we made with council goals, as well as the council work plan. We did make very conservative revenue assumptions, knowing that we are still getting out of the pandemic, and we also want to be sensitive to things can still shift in the economy. We did take into consideration healthcare and labor costs, as they are increasing and have been increasing. We did take into consideration the restoration of positions, as well as the addition of positions to the city. We did take into consideration an increase to PERS unfunded liability, as well as the additional discretionary payment that City Council has made a council decision and policy to continue to fund the unfunded liability on a 15-year clip. We did look at one-time versus reoccurring expenses. And then we also did look and take into consideration the use of fund balance for one-time expenses. Next slide. The City Council goals, again, we just want to make sure that these are first and foremost in the front of everybody's thinking. So I do want to just do a quick overview of what the council established goals are. The first is to improve and maintain safe and reliable city infrastructure with commitment to environmental stewardship and public health, to stabilize, maintain, and improve access to housing, to enhance organizational performance and commit to full public participation, ongoing communication, and regional collaboration, to ensure long-term economic sustainability while supporting St. Helena's charm and rural character, to support thriving families and enhance the safety, well-being, and healthy development of our youth, and finally, to support initiatives that respond to and plan for climate change. Next slide. So an update from the May 31st, 2022 budget workshop that we had, where we presented the general fund, water fund, and wastewater fund. What we did is we did make some modifications to the budget that's being presented for council for adoption tonight. The modifications, the considerations that staff did take into consideration when we were looking at modifications is council's interest in maintaining a fund balance greater than 30%. So we did really take that to heart, and we wanted to make sure that we're not bringing our levels down below that 30% reserve. We want to continue to maintain the conservative revenue and expense projections. We did want to maintain sufficient cash balance for emergencies. We did make use of unrestricted fund balance generally for one-time costs and not ongoing costs. So when you see the list that's presented to you in this presentation, as well as in the staff report, only one of those items was for reoccurring costs. And then also to maintain sufficient cash balance for funding contingencies related to the wastewater treatment plant project for an interfund loan if it's necessary. And so we did want to keep that into consideration. You'll see when we updated our net position, we actually have an individual line item for that. If we do need to use general fund money for an interfund loan, and also to know that interfund loan would be on a short-term basis. Next slide. So here are the updated items that were included in the final budget document for your consideration tonight for approval. So the first is a restoration of a recreation position. And so that does meet, that is the only one-time cost. It is reoccurring cost, meets two of the City Council's goals for an annual amount of $130,000. Library part-time staffing for fiscal year 22-23, an additional $20,000. And so this is to serve two purposes. The first purpose is, as minimum wage increases, we want to make sure that we can still continue to have the part-time staffing we have in the library. And then we also want to add the ability to have a couple extra hours that they could do throughout the year. The Napa Valley College tenant improvements for the construction. So this is an additional $500,000. Replacement of police vehicles. We did have that in the budget for the past 2 years, but unfortunately due to budgetary constraints, we had to remove those from the budget. So we do have a very aging vehicle force, and we do need to replace some of those vehicles. Typically what we do is we do in what's called a lease, but it's actually, we pay it off in 5 years, so it's essentially a loan. What we're making the recommendation, because we do have a healthy fund balance right now, to actually pay outright cash for those vehicles, so we're not paying interest on that. Replenishment of the equipment replacement fund of $100,000. What this $100,000 is we've been slowly putting money into an equipment replacement fund for the Napa Valley College move, particularly when it comes to the IT infrastructure. We are depleting a lot of the capital equipment replacement fund. And what we want to do is be able to start replenishing those funds with some of these, the fund balance. Parks, it's a large equipment replacement. In particular, it is it's a mower with a flail attachment, and I've learned all about flail attachments. And it's to allow us to be able to do a lot more vegetation management, a lot more efficiently in our parks and some of the surrounding areas. Marketing promotion. So this again is one-time funding for $50,000. And this is separate from the chamber contract that was approved by City Council at the last meeting. So this is a completely separate line item in the city budget for the city manager to be able to negotiate with the chamber to add one-time money as a separate budget specifically for targeted marketing promotion. Additional funding for vegetation management. We are very excited that we did get the first part of the FEMA grant for vegetation management, but we know because the timing of those grant funds and the planning involved, we also know that we need to do some more immediate vegetation management. So it's adding some additional funding in there for that. Again, the vegetation management, this is the FEMA match. So it's a 25% FEMA match that's required for the grant that we are receiving. And then the final item is for $50,000, and it's for an interim street improvements on Oak Avenue and College Avenue. And I believe it's more directed towards the Oak Avenue portion to be able to make sure that we do have some funding in there. So the roads are really bad. The Oak Avenue portion is not slated for replacement for 5 years, but we want to be able to do some interim street improvements. So it's not as bad of a road. So that's for $50,000. So the total is $1.2 million. So $1,258,750 that we're making the recommendation we've added into the proposed budget. Next slide. So what this does for our estimated net position, so you'll see our estimated unassigned fund balance at 6/30/2022 is $10.4 million. Our estimated revenues are still $17.2 million, almost $17.3 million. Our new estimated expenses is $18.6 million. So the difference between what was presented on May 31st and what's presented today, on May 31st, we are anticipating use of reserves of $105,000. And so with those additional items, it's now $1.3 million, which leaves our estimated unassigned fund balance at $9 million, which is 49%, which is still above the council reserve level of 30%. And then in addition, we put a placeholder in here of a $2 million inter-fund loan if necessary, just so we want to make sure that even if we need to do that loan, we want to make sure we're still maintaining sufficient balance in our reserves or unassigned fund balance. So that brings our unassigned fund balance to $7 million if we do need to use that $2 million as a temporary loan. So it brings the estimated net position down to 34%. And then if you can go to the following slide, please. So the other exercise that we did, and this was based off of some council feedback that we had before on how do we determine net position. So what we did is we really looked at what the net position was, or the unrestricted fund balance, based off of the reoccurring expenses. So it's taking the same information, so you have the same estimated revenues, the same estimated expenses, but we broke out approximately $1.4 million in the fiscal year 23 budget is for one-time expenses only, so non-reoccurring. So we remove those out. We still have the same revenue, less expenses, so the same use of reserves of $1.3 million. But if we look at our unassigned net position, so this $9 million, the $9 million and the $7 million respectively, that is still what our ending fund balance is. But instead of taking the estimated unassigned fund balance and dividing it by the total expenses, we divided that by the estimated expenses that were reoccurring. So that gives you an idea for, kind of follow it up on the conversation we had earlier with the financial policy, where the reserve levels look like if you truly look at your reoccurring expenses. So in the first scenario, without any funds being loaned for the wastewater treatment plant, we're at 51%. And then if we do take into consideration a potential loan to the wastewater fund for the completion of that project, we're at 41% unassigned reserve levels. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is the enterprise funds, the estimated fund balances. There were no substantial changes from what was presented on May 31st. And so these numbers are the ending fund balance, the unassigned reserves is the exact same dollar amount that we had on May 31st. Next slide. So with that, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council approve the adoption of the fiscal year 22-23 budget. And both myself and City Manager McCann are up for any questions you may have. And I do want to echo his sentiments. I appreciate all the time and energy for all of the department heads that put into this, the time and energy for the council members for the budget workshops, as well as in particular Mandy Kellogg. And unfortunately, she was not able to be at the meeting tonight. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into this document. So I do appreciate all the help and the support and the feedback from everybody, and including the leadership and guidance of City Manager McCann.
Thank you, Dr. Mitz. So with that, I'll look to the council to see if there's input here. And I am seeing no hands from council. I will look, first I'll say thank you very much for the just focused work, and the first slide you presented walking through the process, shows really all the steps that need to be taken. So it's really appreciated to keep this focus. So with that, if there's no council comment at this point, I'll open it to public comment, see if we have public comment at this point.
There's none.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to council, look for additional council comment or look for a motion in terms of adopting the budget. I'm looking to, I see Council Member Hardy.
Thank you. Well, briefly, I just want to comment that the discussion of alternative methods of calculating our fund balance just calls out for me the importance of doing some very thoughtful work on our policies so that we have a defined methodology for making those calculations and then have a consistent basis for understanding where we are. I do remain very concerned about where things are headed.
Thank you. Additional council comment. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. April and Mandy and the rest of the team, thank you very much. I don't think in my life I've ever had to prepare 380 pages in a single document, and thankfully I'm never planning on ever doing that. So I just want to thank you for hanging in there. I did want to follow up just on Councilmember Hardy's comments regarding table 3. I was wondering if you did the reverse exercise also, which was remove any non-recurring revenue and look at it that way.
We did not in this exercise remove any non-reoccurring revenue because the thought behind it, right, wrong, or indifferent, we definitely, I agree with Councilmember Hardy about defining what, how we want to look at this.
Yeah.
But the reason we didn't is because you're looking at the cash fund balance at the end of the year divided by your operating expenses. So that's why we did not then incorporate that in that scenario.
Yep, understood. Thank you. My other comment is on the additional staff recommendations, and it's more of just sort of a process thing that would be great for us to work on as we're engaging in sort of this longer range financial plan and making perhaps some changes to the calendar that you mapped out at the start there. It's interesting to note there's about $1.3 million worth of additional items here that we're seeing kind of for the first time tonight. And we spent 50% of our budget workshop time allocating about $210 for the nonprofit. And if there's a way, we spend a lot of time, 3 hours of our 6 hours allocated on 200 grand. And yet here we are tonight looking at 5 times that number coming out of the same bucket basically, and without a lot of time or effort to comment on any of it. I mean, it all looks like it's needed stuff. There's no doubt. My druthers, of course, are always to give everything to Director Rincon and ask him to run faster. It's just how I view the world. There was a comment in here earlier about the 30-year list, which I loved seeing. It would be great if we actually, again, as we're thinking about how do we revamp our planning process a little bit going forward, where is the list? What's our process for updating it? How do we actually incorporate it in some new documents going forward? What's the dollar number? And are there any, items on there that could be funded with the 1.3 million? I don't know. I mean, I have literally no sense for that. So that's kind of it. I did have one comment on the large equipment replacement for parks. It sounded like this was some sort of mowing tool. And I know that our spray fields grow rapidly because it's one of the few places that gets really rich nutrients routinely. And I know that we have a gentleman or two who spend quite a bit of time trying to keep that mowed for us. I'm wondering, is there any way we could view that differently as, perhaps a cow or sheep method of mowing, and let those animals roam around out there? We could probably bring in a farmer who could help us do that, or even find somebody who knows a little bit about Timothy or some other types of hay who would like to lease that from us and harvest that every single season going forward, and maybe turn what is currently a minor cost for us into at least a couple of dollars going forward. It might also help us, as we transition away from gas mowers to something that's a little bit more sustainable method here. Those are really my only initial comments in going through it. Thank you again for the work on it. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall, my kids would just be thrilled with your suggestion. My concern is that it's used in areas that wouldn't be appropriate for grazing. I love the grazing with the animals and in any area we can. But I just ran into one of our city staff today. I was so impressed. They did cut down all of the foxtails and the weeds. It's also a fire risk over at the dog park. So in that big field. And then I believe today, I didn't get to check it yet, but they were also going to be doing that big open field where the Hunter subdivision would be behind Adams. They also do that. So I think I've seen it, how much it's needed and how often, those grasses grow up, and what a service it is to the community, and all of the fuzzy animals that we have that people just love, and how expensive those foxtails are. And just, of course, with the fire risk and safety, that I really think that this equipment is needed.
Thank you. And I'm seeing City Manager McCann, and I think the idea of looking at a grazing program in the future is an excellent idea. I certainly believe this equipment is needed now, but I do keep being open to those new ideas are great too. Mr. McCann.
Great, thank you. The piece of equipment has a number of uses. The dominant use really is to help us do vegetation management more efficiently. A flail mower is quite an impressive device, but it will also help with mowing the wastewater treatment plant field more efficiently. The other thing, though, is with the new technology that we're putting in at the treatment plant, our reliance on evaporation and growth will be greatly reduced. And so we'll be able to utilize that tertiary treated water for a more productive use, if you will, irrigating land around town, which will free up potable water. So there will be changes at the treatment plant for sure in the not too distant future, this time next year, just about. We expect to be online. And so there'll be an opportunity for Mr. Rincon perhaps to augment his title and become a public works director / sheep herder or farmer or wheat grower or alfalfa or something like that. But so there's an opportunity there for sure.
Thank you.
Very much.
Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you for letting me. I had one other comment. I love Councilmember Hall. You talked about the greenhouse gases with the mower. I just assume that we're making the decisions to do the most efficient, new forms of energy if possible. I don't know if there is an electric mower. I have no idea, but I just want assurances that staff did consider that when making this decision.
Mr. Rincon, any input there?
I'm always keeping an eye for those opportunities, Councilmember Chateau. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of the public works devices, tools, trucks are still, powered by petroleum. And I see it changing, but it's going to take another 5 or 10 years before we get to that level of having large enough batteries to run a device like this.
Thank you. But we do know also that the gas technology is improving. So a new machine should have, increased efficiencies. So with that, I believe I have open public comment. I'll bring it back and to look and see if there's no additional council comment, if we have a motion here on recommend adoption here. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
I'm happy to move adoption of the 22-23 budget as drafted.
I'll second that motion and add my heartfelt thanks to staff for all this work.
Councilmember Hardy?
Oh, Ms. Jen?
I was just clarifying that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, that it would be the resolution adopting the budget for fiscal year 2022-23 budget, and just the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes, and also with deep thanks to Dr. Mitz, to Mandy Kellogg, to Mr. McCann for all the work on this, and everybody from staff for the participation. So that was our last item. We're going to touch on just a few things as we say goodnight here. First, we're going to skip our first meeting in July, so we'll come back on the 26th of July. Second is 4th of July coming up. I want to thank our Parks and Rec and Mr. Jans for all the work in making it a fire safer 4th of July. Want to just keep reminding folks, let's be as fire safe as possible, conserve water where we can, and take a few moments now. I want to recognize Mr. McCann, Jim McCann here. I believe I'm seeing his wife Gretchen on the line, and want to thank you too. I mean, we've been so fortunate to have Mr. McCann here. And as I've said before, as a mayor, when you hear there's a city manager transition, your eyes open very wide and your heart rate gets a little faster. And having Mr. McCann willing to be here and really guide us with a fabulously steady hand through this period as we look to our new city manager, words cannot express my gratitude. And I know also other council members will have some input too and some thanks. Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, I just want to say, Jim, it's moments like this when virtual meetings really suck. It would be so much more satisfying to be able to thank you in person. And who knows, after the meeting's adjourned, propose a toast. But thank you. Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
I just wanted to say thank you as well. It was really impressive how you came in like you did and how much you helped during these public meetings. You have a really nice way, and I'm appreciative that I got to work with you and see you in action. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just want to echo the kudos, Jim. I think what you've done in a short period of time has just been tremendous. Your depth of the local knowledge has been invaluable. Your guidance, I think, not only to staff, but I think the council as well, has been just terrific. And it's been a real pleasure working with you. Hopefully we have an opportunity to continue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Doring.
I'll echo the same comments, Mr. McCann. It's been absolutely wonderful working with you. I'm almost tempted to have a meeting scheduled in the early part of July just to have you back with us, because there's so much more we can do with you. I think we should also thank ourselves, council members, for making an excellent decision on Mr. McCann to steward us since February until now. Very impressive. You're so well respected here, and I wish you the best in all of your endeavors, and looking forward to having a drink with you sometime in the future in Napa.
Great.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable. I sometimes wish that I was 10 years younger, because it'd be fun to spend 10 years with you all, because there's certainly no shortage of interesting and challenging projects, but I'm convinced that St. Helena has an extremely bright future. So you're focused and have really good council members who are have the interest of the community forefront. The staff that I've worked with are just extremely dedicated, very, very hardworking, very talented. So the community is very fortunate to have you all. So I've enjoyed my time. I've got a couple more weeks here, so I've got a list on my wall of things that I'd like to try to accomplish. So we'll see if we can make some headway on those. But I can just tell you, you're in really good hands with the staff, the line staff, and all of the different departments. Really good folks. Our city attorney, Ethan, is just been really a pleasure to work with. We're very fortunate to have him. Certainly nice to have Joanna tonight and to meet her. April, it's wonderful to have her in a new position where her talents, I think, can blossom, and I think she's really going to thrive. Our department heads are really great to work with, very talented, again, super hardworking. Our city clerk is an extraordinary clerk, very patient. I can tell you that because I bug the heck out of her all the time, but we're very fortunate to have her. And then I think you're going to be in very good hands with Anil. Mr. Camello is going to fit right in, and I think you need to, I think everybody, the community, the council, our boards and commissions, staff, really just need to help him be successful, because he's got the tools to do that, but he needs the help, the teamwork, the collaboration to do that. So I really appreciate Paul contacting me saying, hey, there's an opportunity. Would you be interested? So thank you, Mr. Doring. And I really thank the council for having the confidence to let me help you out over the last couple of months. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I want to just ask if Dr. Mitz or Cindy would just make a comment from staff, just to help round this out a little bit. If one of you would mind just chiming in a little bit.
It has been an absolute joy working across the hall from you, Jim. You've been an absolute treat, and you've really been so professional and helpful and encouraging. I thank you so much, and I'm really going to be sad to see you go.
Thank you.
But I don't think there's much more that I can add to that. I mean, Jim has been fantastic to work with. You always get anxious when you get a new boss in, but it has been a lot of fun. But he shoots straight from the hip. He's honest. He's been great to work with, and he's on speed dial. I have his own personal phone number, so he can't get rid of me that fast. That's all I'm saying. So thanks, Jim.
We've got him for a few more weeks, so we'll get everything we can.
Yeah, I got to admit that I was a little leery when Jim came here as well, but talk about an open communicator and somebody that really has your back. His true colors, the vice mayor yesterday and the mayor both got to see him take the bull by the horns yesterday in the meeting, where he very easily could have just taken a step back. But the way he directed that meeting alone says a lot for his leadership. Thank you, Jim, for everything you've done. And I will see you before you go. We still have some work to do.
No, indeed. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. This was a really terrific meeting. And Jim, thank you for your leadership over the last many months of a challenging period. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the kind words, everybody.
So with that, happy 4th. And we'll see everybody on the 26th. If there's nothing else for the good of the group, we'll adjourn and see you at the next meeting.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Good meeting.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.